44 seconds. That is all it took. 44 seconds for Marjorie Taylor Greene to sit in complete silence after Robert Garcia set a printed transcript on the table, looked at her directly, and said the 8 words that turned that hearing room completely still. "You said you don't need his answer. We need yours. Not a complicated request, not a legal trap, just a transcript." Every word she had said in that room on June 3rd, 2024. Every accusation, every insult, every claim she had thrown at a man she refused to call doctor and refused to let speak. All of it printed out. All of it on the table, all of it waiting for the woman who said those words to now sit in the same kind of room and answer for them. Watch what happens when Garcia reads that transcript out loud. Watch Greene's face. Watch her attorneys exchange a look. And watch 44 seconds of silence from the woman who told America she didn't need anyone's answer. You need to see this until the very end, because what Garcia uncovered in that hearing room is not just about Anthony Fauci. It is about what it means to make accusations in a congressional hearing room under the protection of legislative privilege and then walk away before the person you accused can respond. It is about 5 minutes of questions with no answers. And it is about one woman who spent those 5 minutes telling the country that a decorated scientist belonged in prison without ever once allowing him to defend himself. If you are new to this channel, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This hearing just became the most important testimony of the year, and you need to see every second of what happened next. Let me set the scene for you. House Oversight Committee, Room 2154, Wednesday morning, 10:19 a.m., Eastern Time. The room carried the particular weight of a place where something unfinished is about to be finished. Everyone in that building who had been present on June 3rd, 2024, every journalist, every aide, every committee member who had watched Greene refuse to call Fauci doctor, refuse to let him answer, hold up photos of beagles, call him a criminal, and then walk out, understood what this session represented. Not a rematch. Something more specific than that. A reckoning with the record. Because congressional hearing rooms have a specific quality that most people do not fully appreciate. Everything said in them goes into the permanent record. Every word, every accusation, every claim made under the protection of legislative privilege that allows members of Congress to say things in those rooms that they cannot be sued for saying anywhere else. And Robert Garcia had decided that the permanent record deserved a response from the person who had made it. Garcia arrived first. He sat down and he opened a folder. One document inside, 47 lines of printed text, a transcript of Greene's 5-minute questioning session from June 3rd, 2024. He had read it many times. He looked at it one more time, then he set it face down and waited. Greene arrived with 3 attorneys and 2 aides. That walk, that chin, the practiced posture of someone who has been in hostile rooms their entire career. She sat down at the witness table and she looked across at Garcia. He was already looking at her. Not hostile. Not performative. The particular steadiness of someone who has been thinking about this conversation for a long time and has decided exactly how it is going to go. Greene checked her phone. She looked almost relaxed. She had made her Fauci statements publicly, repeatedly, on camera, on record. She had nothing to hide about them. She thought she knew the shape of this session. She did not see what Garcia had written at the top of that transcript. The first 20 minutes were standard procedure. Committee counsel handled background questions, Greene's role on the Oversight Committee, her attendance record at the COVID subcommittee hearings, the procedural foundation. Greene answered each one with the practiced efficiency of someone who has done this hundreds of times. Short, clean, no openings. She looked comfortable. She thought the worst was behind her. Then Robert Garcia took the microphone. Congresswoman Greene. The room shifted in the way it shifts when something personal enters a space that is supposed to be procedural. Garcia and Greene had history in that room. He had been the one who stood up after her 5 minutes on June 3rd and said this might be the most insane hearing I have ever attended. He had apologized to Fauci directly, on camera, in front of the committee. That moment was in the record, too, and now here they both were, in the same kind of room, with the same cameras, and Garcia holding the same transcript. "I want to read you something." Garcia reached into his folder without looking down. He pulled out the single printed document and placed it flat on the table facing the cameras. He did not rush. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Greene. "This is a transcript of your 5-minute questioning session from the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic hearing on June 3rd, 2024. He paused. "I was in that room. I watched every second of it." He looked back at the transcript. "I am going to read it to you now." He found the first line. He read slowly, deliberately, letting every word land completely before moving to the next. Quote, "Mr. Fauci, because you're not doctor, you're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes." End quote. He looked up. He looked at Greene. He looked back down. Quote, "I don't need your answer." End quote. He looked up again. He set the transcript down. He looked at Greene directly. "In the first 30 seconds of your 5 minutes, you denied a doctor his title and told him his answer was not needed." He paused. "I want to ask you about that specific decision. Anthony Fauci holds an MD from Cornell University Medical College. He completed his residency at New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. He served as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases for 38 years. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He has published over 1,300 scientific papers." He looked at Greene. "What specific credential was he missing that caused you to decide he was not a doctor?" Greene's lead attorney shifted in his seat. Greene looked at Garcia. Her expression was controlled, practiced. She had answered versions of this question before, in media interviews, on social media. She had her response ready. "He is not my doctor. His credentials do not entitle him to my respect. He abused his position." She had said all of those things before. She was ready to say them again. "Congresswoman," her voice was flat and steady, "Anthony Fauci has a medical degree. Whether I choose to acknowledge it is a matter of my personal assessment of his conduct. His credentials do not obligate me to use an honorific for someone I believe has caused significant harm to the American people." Garcia looked at her for a moment. He wrote one word on his notepad. Then he looked up. He picked up the transcript again. He found the next passage. He read it. Quote, "That man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked." End quote. He set the transcript down. He looked at Greene. "You said that publicly, in a congressional hearing, under legislative privilege." He paused. "Medical license revocation in the United States is governed by state medical boards. It requires a formal complaint, an investigation, a hearing, and specific findings of misconduct." He looked at Greene. "On what specific grounds were you recommending his license be revoked? What specific act of medical misconduct were you referring to?" Greene's second attorney leaned forward slightly. Greene did not look at her. She was looking at Garcia. Something was shifting in her expression. Not the collapse of someone who has been caught, the particular recalibration of someone who expected to be attacked and is instead being asked to be precise. "Congressman, the grounds for my recommendation were his conduct during the pandemic, the social distancing guidelines that were not evidence-based, the masking guidance for children. The funding of gain-of-function research, the attempts to suppress information about the lab leak hypothesis, these are not minor procedural matters. These are policy decisions that affected hundreds of millions of Americans. I stand by my assessment of his conduct. Garcia nodded slowly. He wrote something. Then he looked up. He picked up the transcript. He found the next section. He read it. Quote, "He belongs in prison." End quote. He set it down. He looked at Greene. Prison in the United States requires a criminal conviction. A conviction requires a charge. A charge requires a specific violation of a specific law. He looked at Greene directly. What law did Anthony Fauci break that you believe warrants imprisonment? If you have made it this far and this matters to you, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. What Garcia reads next from that transcript is the line that turned this session into something nobody in that room was expecting. Stay with this until the end. Greene's lead attorney was on his feet. Congressman Garcia, my client made those statements in a prior congressional hearing under the protection of legislative privilege. She is not obligated to defend her protected speech in a subsequent proceeding, and I would sit down, Counselor. Garcia's voice had not changed in volume. It had simply become more precise. The particular precision of someone who has been in legislative proceedings long enough to know exactly what legislative privilege does and does not cover. Legislative privilege protects members from civil liability for statements made in the course of their legislative duties. He looked at the attorney. It does not protect them from being asked to explain those statements in a subsequent legislative proceeding. Your client made accusations about a private citizen in a public forum. Those accusations are in the permanent record. She can explain them. He looked back at Greene. The attorney can sit down. The attorney sat down. Now I need to stop for a second. If you believe that members of Congress should be required to provide specific legal and factual basis for accusations they make in official hearings, hype this video right now. The hype button is right next to like. You can hype 3 times a day for free. We have 7 days to get this into the top 100 most hyped videos on YouTube. Every single hype counts. Do it now. Then keep watching, because what Garcia produces next from that folder is the document that reframes every accusation Greene made in that hearing room. Garcia reached into his folder. He pulled out a second document. He held it up. Then he placed it flat on the table next to the transcript. This is Dr. Fauci's curriculum vitae. He opened it. He read from the first page. Medical degree, Cornell University Medical College, 1966. Residency, New York Hospital, Cornell Medical Center. Board certified in internal medicine and infectious diseases. Director, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, 1984 to 2022. Presidential Medal of Freedom, 2008. Lasker Award, National Medal of Science. He set it down next to the transcript. He looked at Greene. 38 years, 1,300 papers. Every major award his field gives. He tapped the transcript. You said he does not deserve a license and belongs in prison. He tapped the CV. This is what you were saying that about. He looked at Greene. I want you to look at both of these documents and tell me which specific entry in his record justifies either of those statements. 44 seconds. A committee aide in the back of the room counted it. A journalist in the second row checked her watch. Another journalist confirmed the number independently. 44 seconds where Marjorie Taylor Greene, the woman who had told Anthony Fauci she did not need his answer, said absolutely nothing. Her hands were on the table. Her attorneys were both still. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning above the press gallery, because the question Garcia had asked was not a political question. It was not a partisan ambush. It was a simple evidentiary question. Which specific entry in this record justifies those statements? And the silence in that room was the sound of an answer that did not exist. Drop a comment right now. Tell me what 44 seconds of silence in response to that question means. Tell me what it means when someone who said a decorated scientist belonged in prison cannot point to a single specific thing he did that warrants it. When Greene finally spoke, her voice had the controlled flatness of someone choosing every word very carefully. Congressman Garcia, the specific basis for my statements was the totality of Dr. Fauci's conduct during the pandemic, the gain-of-function research funding, the social distancing guidance that, as Dr. Fauci himself admitted, was not based on specific studies, the masking mandates imposed on children, the suppression of the lab leak hypothesis. I am not a medical board. I am not a prosecutor. I was expressing my view as a member of Congress representing constituents who suffered under those policies. Garcia looked at her for a moment. He did not write anything. He just looked at her. Then he picked up the transcript one final time. He found the last line he had marked. He read it. Quote, "I don't need your answer." End quote. He set it down. He looked at Greene. You said that to Anthony Fauci on June 3rd, 2024, in a congressional hearing room. He paused. You asked him questions and then told him his answers were not needed. He looked at the committee, he looked at the cameras, then he looked back at Greene. The American people watched a member of Congress call a scientist a criminal. I say he belonged in prison, deny him his professional title, and then cut him off before he could respond. He picked up both documents together, the transcript and the CV. He held them as a pair. And now I have asked you the same questions you asked him. He set them both down. Except I am not cutting you off. I am waiting for your answer. He looked at Greene directly. Because unlike you, I think answers matter. He paused. Which specific act, which specific law, which specific credential was missing? He looked at her. Take your time. Greene looked at Garcia. Garcia looked at Greene. The room was very still. She said, I have already answered your questions. I expressed my view. My constituents sent me here to hold people like Anthony Fauci accountable. I did that. Garcia nodded slowly. He gathered both documents. He placed them carefully back in his folder. He closed it. He looked at Greene one final time. He said quietly, Dr. Anthony Fauci testified in that room for hours. He answered every question he was allowed to answer. He sat there while you told him he didn't deserve a license and belonged in prison. He sat there while you held up photos of dogs and asked questions you then said you didn't need answered. He sat there through all of it. He looked at his folder. And he is still getting death threats. He looked at Greene. You said that you held him accountable. He shook his head slightly. What you did was make accusations you cannot support with specific facts against a man you would not let speak. He picked up his folder. That is not accountability. He paused. That is the thing accountability is supposed to stop. And he stepped back from the microphone. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. The hearing continued for another 30 minutes. Other committee members asked other questions, procedural matters, standard oversight business. None of it had the weight of what had just happened in those 20 minutes. Because Robert Garcia had walked into that room with one document, a 47-line transcript of 5 minutes from a hearing that had happened months earlier, and had done something remarkably simple. He had read it back, line by line, and then asked for the evidence behind each line. And the woman who had said all of those things in that room, under the protection of legislative privilege, with the cameras rolling and the stenographer typing, had produced 44 seconds of silence and then told him she had already answered his questions. Within the hour, the clips were everywhere. Garcia reading the transcript line by line, Garcia holding the transcript next to the CV, the 44 seconds of silence, and then the quiet final statement. What you did was make accusations you cannot support with specific facts against a man you would not let speak. That is not accountability. That is the thing accountability is supposed to stop. Medical ethics scholars were already discussing whether Greene's statements about license revocation and imprisonment made under legislative privilege in an official proceeding had any evidentiary basis in medical board standards or criminal law. Congressional procedure experts were noting that Garcia's use of a prior hearing transcript as the sole evidentiary document in a subsequent proceeding was itself a significant procedural move, turning the permanent record against itself. This is not about politics. This is not about whether you agree with Fauci's COVID guidance or disagree with it. This is about a specific set of statements made in a specific room on a specific day. Statements that called for imprisonment without specifying a crime. Statements that called for license revocation without specifying misconduct. Statements made under the protection of a privilege specifically designed to allow free legislative inquiry directed at a private citizen who was not allowed to respond. And when someone finally asked for the factual basis of those statements, in the same kind of room with the same cameras, the answer was 44 seconds of silence and a statement about constituent accountability. Share this video everywhere. The June 3, 2024 transcript is in the permanent congressional record. Anthony Fauci's credentials are public. The 44 seconds of silence is now in the record of this hearing. And the question Garcia asked, which specific act, which specific law, which specific missing credential, is now a permanent part of the congressional record too. Unanswered. Permanently unanswered, right next to the accusations that prompted it. Subscribe now. Hit the bell. And if you missed Elizabeth Warren asking Greene whether her stock portfolio could have performed the same way under the rules she voted to prevent, or Liz Cheney placing the martial law text message next to the sworn testimony that said, "I don't recall, watch those videos on screen right now." 8 hearings, 8 documents, 8 silences, the same pattern from 8 different directions. A public servant who said things she could not support, voted for things that benefited her, and refused answers she did not want to hear. 1 document at a time, 1 hearing at a time, 1 44-second silence at a time, 44 seconds, 1 transcript, 47 lines, 5 minutes of accusations, and the woman who said she didn't need anyone's answer sitting in silence when someone finally asked her for hers.